Hi there, my name is Ferrari and this is my reassessment for the course Songwriting. I already had an assessment back on the 21st of May and I was asked to do the theory part again. So the topics that I'm going to talk about are the circle of fifths, key signatures, note intervals, scales, chords, rhythm, note value, and time signatures. It might happen that I won't talk a lot about some topics in particular, but I'll try to combine all of them and I'll explain how they're connected. The first thing I'm going to talk about is the circle of fifths. The circle of fifths is simply the relationship between the 12 notes, and it shows how their key signatures correspond to each other. And if I want to build the circle of fifths, I'm going to arrange all the 12 notes around a circle, but rather than to just put it in the usual order, I'm going to separate them by a fifth. So starting with a C, I want to know what a fifth, the next fifth is, like from C, and I know that I have to count up 7 semi-steps, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I get to the G, so I know that the second note is a G, and I do that with the other notes as well. So I end up having C, G, D, A, E, B, F sharp. And if I want to find out the key signature, I know that C hasn't got any key signature, but if I go to G, to the G scale, I count a way up, which is so I know that the G major scale has a F sharp, and my next scale would be the D major scale, but instead of just counting all the way up again, I can just count from the last sharp to the next one. So this is also like 5 steps apart. So imagine I've got the F sharp scale, and I go 5 steps again. Should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I get to the C sharp. So I know that's my second sharp, and yeah, it goes like that with the other ones with the other ones as well. So I do that over and over again. So it's always the same sharps, but there's always one added to it. So I end up having F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, A sharp, E sharp for the F sharp scale. And this looks like this. And this, now I've got the half of the circle. And I can do the same thing. I can do the exact same thing with this half. And just count way up, like always 5 steps. It's always a fifth apart, and that's how I get to all the notes. And then it's the same for the key signature as well, but then I've got like flats instead of sharps. So there are a lot of ways to use the circle of fifths. It makes a lot of things easier in music theory. For example, if you got notes, if you want to find out what the notes of a chord are, and you got the C major chord, you obviously know the first note is the C, and that the second one is 2 steps away from the first one, which is an E. And instead of just counting all the way up, you know by the circle of fifths that the one in the circle after C, the note is G, means it's a fifth away. So the third note of the C major chord is a G. And also when it comes to root chords and the dominant chords, if we got the D major chord, for instance, and we want to find out what the dominant chord of it is, then we know it's a fifth away, and we know if we got the circle of fifths in mind, that the note after the D in the circle is an A, means the dominant chord of the D root chord is an A major chord. It's probably the most useful for keys, because you basically know all the key signatures to all the scales, and as soon as you see a piano sheet, you know in what kind of key it's written, and you know what sharps or flats to play. And also when you write music and you start with the C scale, you wouldn't jump to the F sharp scale, because the key signature is very different and it wouldn't sound right. So you would rather switch to the G scale, because only one note is different, which is the F sharp. And if you do want to go to the F sharp scale, you know how to work your way there, and you could go from the C scale to the A scale to the B scale and then to the F sharp scale. And yeah, also when you think of the relative chords and relative scales, we know that relative scales and chords have the same key signature. So if you got all the scales of the circle in fifths in mind, you basically know all the key signatures of the relative scales. So if we know that the C scale hasn't got any key signature, no flats and no sharps, we also know, if we find out what is the relative scale to the C scale, which is easy, we just have to count 6 steps up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you know that A minor is the relative scale to C major, and that's how you also know, because it has the same key signature, that it has no flats and no sharps. And it also works for the G scale, for example. Play the G scale. And we want to find out what the relative scale is. We count 6 steps again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We get to the E scale, and we know that the relative scale is an E minor scale. And we know, because the G scale has an F sharp as a key signature, we also know that the E minor scale has an F sharp as well. And if we want to think of it the other way around, and we have A minor and we want to find out what the relative scale is, we just have to count 3 steps up. Just 1, 2, 3, get to the C, and we know that C major is the relative scale to A minor. So now I'm going to talk about the note intervals. There are 8 different intervals. There is the unison, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, and the 8th. And if I play it, it sounds like this. And there are 2 different kind of intervals. They're the perfect intervals. Perfect intervals are the unison, the fourth, the fifth, and the octave. And all the other ones are major intervals, which are the second, the third, the sixth, and the seventh. And let's say I want to play a perfect fourth between the notes F and B flat, and I want to make it half a step wider, then I will call it an augmented fourth, and I will play F and B. And if I want to make the perfect fourth half a step lower, I will play F and B double flat, and that will be called a diminished fourth. And if we assume I've got a major third between F and A, and I want to make it half a step wider, I also call it augmented, and that will be F and A sharp. And if I would want to make it half a step lower, I call it a minor third, and that would be F and A flat. And if I want to make it a whole step lower, it would be F and A double flat. So that would be that. And then I would call it a diminished third. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is the rhythm. There are different kind of time signatures, like for example the 6/8 time or the 3/4 time. But the one I'm going to stick with is the 4/4 time rhythm, because it's just the easiest way to explain it. There are different note values in every rhythm, and the main ones are the whole note, the half note, the quarter note, the eighth note, and the 16th note. And if I want to clap them in the same order, it would sound like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 iana, 2 iana, 3 iana, 4 iana. And then we've got the rests, which are also very important when it comes to rhythm. And you can see them as the same amount of time like the notes. There's the whole rest, the half rest, the quarter rest, the eighth rest, and the 16th rest. For example, when you think of the half rest, it has to be silent for a half note, so for 2 beats. And if I want to combine the note values and the rests, I've got a sample rhythm like this one. If I clap it, it sounds like this: 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you.